That's the guy, Adriana. My Uncle Tony. The guy I'm going to hell for.
What a liar. Major spoilers for The Sopranos, but Christopher Moltisanti proves himself wrong in that very episode. He's about to flip on Tony and flee with Adriana, and what changes his mind? The sight of a poor family. People living a mediocre life, living like schmucks. No riches, no glamour, no fame, the kind of life Chris cannot stand. We know why thanks to season 1 episode 8. He carries a latent sense of emptiness. He's depressed, he wants to feel alive. He likely feels this gnawing sense of meaninglessness because he's been groomed into this life since childhood. He doesn't see any other future for him. That's why he tries to escape this through screenwriting, but unfortunately he's so deeply entrenched in the mafia lifestyle that it bleeds into his work too. This is why he seeks to cope with this sense of meaninglessness through glory. The end of the episode has him feeling glee because he finally got the notoriety he sought. This notoriety not only satiates his ego by essentially acting as a rite of passage for him, as he stated earlier in the episode,
Brendan Falone, associate, soldier, fuck you.
but it also further endangers his life. A common motif in the series is the characters trying to feel alive by placing themselves on the edge of death. The reason why I think this episode decided to show his depression then of all episodes was because that was also when he was haunted by the ghost of his victim, Emile. He felt anxious about being caught, but I think this anxiety goes deeper than that. I think it's a manifestation of a subconscious sense of guilt. Why? Fast forward to season 2 episode 9 and Christopher has a coma dream where he is in hell and sees other mafioso as well as his victims there. One of the most fascinating parts of the series is its ambiguity with regards to whether something is supernatural or just the characters tripping. While I think it's hard to tell in most cases, in this specific case I'm almost certain that this is a hallucination. The reason is because Christopher mentions being in hell at an Irish bar where some Irish players roll dice and get lucky. This is definitely due to the cultural association between Irish people and luck, leprechauns and whatnot, you know? So this gives me the impression that his vision is just a manifestation of his subconscious and the cultural understandings that Christopher has. From this we can extrapolate that he feels like what he's doing is wrong on some subconscious level. That's why he sees himself in hell while being reminded of his victims. This indicates that his anxiety about Emile's corpse being found in season 1 was actually his guilt manifesting itself as anxiety about being caught, sort of like Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment. In other words, it's his guilt about his actions that weigh on his soul, that hone in the meaninglessness of his life, that make him feel trapped in this lifestyle and thus make him feel the need to cope by indulging in his infamy. It's like an ugly loop where his actions get him depressed and thus make him feel the need to commit more and more of those same actions, and he digs himself deeper and deeper into this until it eventually culminates in him killing his fiancée because he does not want to live an empty life without that glamour. It's ironic because here he finally got an opportunity to escape from the thing that got him depressed in the first place, but at this point he's gone so deep into it and racked up so many bodies that he has no choice but to stay if he ever wants to cope with his issues, at least from his point of view. This really hones in on the tragedy of the episode where Christopher sees hell. In that episode, Carmela prays for him to see the light and to change his ways, yet Christopher's vision not only fails to make him change but likely actively puts him deeper into his issues. If his guilt is driving him deeper into the mafia lifestyle, then it's incredibly likely that his vision of hellfire only exacerbated his guilt and thus further motivated him to stay in the mafia. This actually somewhat parallels Tony's reaction to Chris having this vision. He sort of struggles with the existence of hell towards the beginning of the episode, really sloppily trying to justify why he and Chris aren't going to go to hell for reasons you can tell he's only articulating on the spot.
We're in a situation where everybody involved knows the stakes, and if you're going to accept those stakes, you gotta do certain things.
Eventually he tells Polly that it's all relative bullshit, and he uses the example of how someone in India would think it's sinful to eat steak. An interesting detail is that at the end of the episode you see him eating at a steakhouse. It's like some part of him is anxious about going to hell, so he's making himself eat steak as a subconscious way to affirm the relativity of it all. Another scene even has him be extra cruel with his execution of Sean. He insists that he personally do it himself, and he needlessly toys with a kid before shooting shooting him. One could see this as simple vengeance for shooting Christopher, but if you take in the larger context of the episode, it could also be seen as him making himself be as sinful as possible so as to prove to himself that hell is not a concern for him. It's an attempt to quell his anxieties about divine judgment, anxieties which never fully go away until one of the final episodes. This parallel is important to Christopher because Tony's own lack of progress is also what hinders Christopher's progress throughout the series too. There's Tony dragging down Christopher in his struggle for addiction, but on a macro level, Tony not quitting the life is also what leads to Chris committing many atrocities. There does seem to be some level of blame there. Throughout season 6, we see Chris resent Tony and feel a sense of entitlement because he supposedly killed Adriana for Tony's sake. Of course, we know this is bullshit. He would have betrayed Tony had it not been for his fear of living a normal life, but he feels such an immense level of guilt that he has convinced himself that he killed her for reasons that are not self-serving, for reasons that are considered more honorable in their culture. What's interesting though is that his feelings of entitlement and resentment are still real. He expresses it plenty of times, even unintentionally through the movie he made, and it plays a big part in his relationship with Tony deteriorating. So if he's just coping and thinking that his loyalty made him kill Adriana, then that begs the question, where is this resentment coming from? Most likely, Christopher feels as if it's Tony's fault that Christopher is in the life to begin with. Tony played a huge part in grooming Chris since childhood to become part of the mafia, and he continues to do so. It's possible Chris partly even blames his own father for setting him on this path, but as it stands, Tony is the only father figure in Chris's life, so any blame Chris has for his own father would be directed towards Tony instead. As such, in season 6, Chris feels like Tony owes him, not because Chris did a huge favor for Tony, but because it's the least Tony could do for trapping him in this lifestyle that makes him miserable, for putting him in the lifestyle that made him kill Adriana. If Chris was more honest to himself about his actual feelings, he would not say that he thinks he's going to hell for Tony, he would say that he's going to hell because of Tony. Thanks for watching.